So the contextual concerns that we're looking at within this speech, for those of you who aren't aware, there's quite a lot of drama that occurs within the Middle East, and particularly around the creation of Israel as a country. There was there was 4 wars that led up to this. Okay, so after World War One in 1917, there was a declaration from the British. It's called the Balfour World War One. It's in here somewhere. Where is it? So this declaration came from the British, basically about saying that there should be a creation of an Israel state, a state for the Jews to go to. There was a big movement of Zionism throughout Europe at the time, which is the notion of a Jewish state and the Jewish people. So the decision was to the setup of this state. Where the Palestinian people were living at the time. The part was known as Palestine at the time. What happened was, as part of this declaration, was that it should be made with respect for the people who were living there at the time. And what happened? Obviously, there's 2 sides to every story, but the position of the speaker here, being the fact that he was Arabic and the president of Egypt, was that Israel had gone beyond what they should have done and had not respected the processes that were laid out and had not respected the people who lived there at the time. Now, so the original state of Israel was a fairly small portion of land within that area. However, it quickly grew over time. Now, as it grew and out, they took more land, and the Palestinian people who lived there were viewed by many as being persecuted. And so the Jewish people who came and set up this state of Israel were heavily backed by the allied nations of America and England. They were given weapons support. You had lots of Jewish people coming from America, fleeing from Europe, and moving to this Jewish state. It led to a series of wars. The culmination of which, for this speech, was the Yom Kippur War, which is Yom Kippur is a period which you would know about because you do it. It's a celebration. Okay, so it's in the Jewish faith. So it's during that period. So 1 year don't do that. Okay, so the Yom Kippur is a time of religious reverence within the Jewish faith, and so this war leading up to the 1973 war. We have him coming to speak at the essentially the parliament. That's what the Kisnet means. It's like a meeting place in Hebrew. This war, this was a significant event because just a few years prior, he'd obviously been at war, leading a war against them. So there was Egypt and Syria against them. Now there was a series of wars. Israel constructed a wall, a literal wall, separating them. Some of it was destroyed in 1973 war. So it's really, really tenuous time in terms of the movement towards peace. Now, there's lots of brokering of peace between the 2 parties, and ultimately, if we look at it now, it's unsuccessful. So the Palestinians still live in some very terrible conditions, surrounded by the Israel forces, and there's no self-determination of them as a state. And that's some of the stuff he talks about going through it. The links that I've given you on Edmodo include a little bit of a summary, which I'm just going to talk about now. So the audience that we need to look at is he delivered his speech in Arabic to the Knesset, which means gathering or assembly, and I apologize to any Hebrew people, speakers of the Hebrew language, for me murdering their language with that. I'm sure it sounds nothing like that. This body is responsible for passing all the Israeli laws and electing the PM and president. The audience was hostile to an extent because, again, waged war with them 4 years prior. The thing to, I guess, be aware of is that within the Jewish or Israeli politics, there's a very hardline right, very conservative movement who are very much believe that they should just wipe out all Arabs out of Israel. There are some more liberal views as well on the left, but for the most part, it is quite to the right of politics on that regard. I guess you don't need to go into too much of it, but just to understand it, I guess their whole origin has been, their whole time as a country has been disputed by everyone around them. So they're essentially they're just a Western ally in the middle, surrounded by all the Arabic world. Okay, so that gives an indication of why they would be feeling unsafe. So he became, in terms of Sadat himself, he was the third president of Egypt in 1970. This speech, as I had already said, the 1973, there was the October or Yom Kippur War, which lasted from the 6th of October to 25th of October, 1973. And then the Egyptians and Syrian armies, they made some gains, but the Israeli army, who were heavily, like I said, heavily backed and heavily trained, end up routing them. So they won that war. Moving on in terms of consequences that come out of it, Egypt was expelled from the Arab Leagues from 1978 to 1989. So the other Arab nations were not in favor of this movement to peace. A peace between Israel and Egypt was created. Became known as the Camp David Accord. So that's a positive that came. It's a tenuous peace, but it's a peace. He ended up winning the Nobel Peace Prize. And ultimately, he was assassinated by a member of his bodyguard. So that was assassinated in 81. When we're looking at this, the things that we could be looking at are peace, the desire for peace, justice, nature of humanity or the commonality of humanity, and the role of religion. So desire for peace, justice, commonality of humanity or the shared human experience, and the role of religion. Now we're going to start going through the speech, but just give me 2 seconds.